everybody. Welcome to RiverCity-Media. I'm the Howie Chaney along with Phil Harris. And we got special coach tonight, Coach Joe Guthrie of the Northeast Lady Mustang softball team. And as you can tell, he's on the road. No rest for the weary, is there, Coach?
No, we've got, there's a lot going on. I think yesterday I was in Dalton, Georgia, closer to you guys. They had the PGF state, championships on Saturday and Sunday. Some really, really good talent. Probably some of the best talent in Georgia was there. And then obviously we got Tennessee finals going on all across the state. I think they're in district or regionals, right before they get to state. And then, and then Alabama's got their state tournament going on in Oxford. So a lot of stuff going on, in about a 2-hour radius. That's pretty important right now.
Absolutely. I've got some not official, but maybe official records here. Y'all played 44 games this year, went 17-25 or 17-26-1 this year. I know it's not the way you wanted it to be, but how do you feel after this being your first year with that type of record?
Well, we're not really focused that much on it. The biggest thing is, it's like Saban says, you want to get the right people on the bus, get them in the right seats, and get the wrong ones off. And, you get your culture, basically defined. And I think we, got closer to that. You're always looking for that, to get where you need to go. And it's tough when you're, putting together a $10 million project in our first year and getting all the pieces in place. And you kind of feel like you're playing catch up a lot. But yeah, and that I felt really good about. We wanted people that are looking down range with us, going forward. And, that's what we felt like we achieved, and we've got a really good group coming in. So it's still more like a complete team moving forward. And that's really,
Coach,
against the kids that were there. It's just reality, so that's tougher to achieve in year one, but you
Coach, I don't know if you can hear me now, but you've completely went out. The man on the road must be in a bad cell service area, Phil. And
yeah, right now, yeah.
But I mean, the record, as he said, the record's not what they're really looking at, but overall, it's a pretty good record for a first-year team, I feel like.
Well, I think they were competitive in a lot of games. They didn't do, their conference record didn't show it, but I mean, they were competitive in a lot of games, won a lot of games. And I think what happens, and I was going to ask him about this, if this is the truth, is they only won road games. But when you're a first-year team and you're doing a lot of traveling, there's a lot of distractions, everything from when you get there on the bus, where do we go? Where's the hotel at? Where do we put our stuff? There's a lot of things that distract you from playing softball. Well, the biggest thing is when you hit a road trip, you want to step off that bus, walk on that field, totally be focused for 2 softball games. And when you're a new team and you have all these things running at you, timetables and all that kind of stuff, you get to think too much. And I think you lose it kind of mentally, and it's hard for teams to gel. And I think that's part of having a new team is not having the experience. Like next year, if they go to Calhoun, they know exactly where they're going, where they're going to park the bus, how they're going to work, where their locker room is, and they don't have to stand around and ask a bunch of questions. You just go do it. And that'll take a lot off the players. So, I think a year's experience will help. And it's going to help with Coach Guthrie, too, knowing that, he's been to this place again. And, he knows what to expect, and he knows what to tell the girls. Because right now, you just show up and play, and, you're not sure of a lot of things around you.
Yeah, I'm looking at their stats right now. The away record was 4-16. So once they got away from the Pals area over there, it kind of went downhill. And I was going to ask them the same thing as far as some of these girls have never played out of Alabama. much less, traveling some of these places they played. So I was going to ask him kind of the same thing that you did as far as how big of a difference from this first part of the season or the first season, I guess you can say, compared to this next season coming up, because a lot of the girls will actually have experience there as far as playing at those places.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, that will make a difference. And I think too is when you're first coming out of high school too, and there's not a lot of veterans on this team. They only had 6 sophomores, so there's not a lot of veterans on the team. Is when you're first coming out of school, these girls are used to being the it on their softball teams. They're the stars. Well, now you got to blend in with a bunch of great players. So it's a little bit different. You've got to learn your role because you're not going to be a superstar when you first come in. So there's growing pains there. And sometimes that can be a little bit mentally frustrating. And then two, I think too, some of what he's talking about ones that maybe don't want to play softball, some of them are going to get to school and decide softball's too much. I want to concentrate on academics. And, that kind of thing happens. That's where I think that's kind of where he's talking about who wants to play and who don't, who wants it, to be a recreational sport or who is going to be all in, so to speak.
Let's try this one more time.
Okay.
Coach Guthrie, we got you now.
Okay. Not sure what happened there.
Oh, it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could just go ahead, I was talking to you about the record, and you said that wasn't a big standard, I guess you can say, this year. So if you will, pick up right there.
Yeah, just trying to get the culture right. You got to get, there's a lot of people when you come in the first year and you've got, I got hired just after July 4th. You're pushing pedal to the metal to get to November 1st. And you've got a huge, $10 million facility project that I don't know has ever been attempted in our state, something to that magnitude. So we got that rolling. But when you don't have the experience on the field and, that has been there with us, it gets pretty daunting. There's little things that pop up at the end of the year. If you don't have that, you'll see it. Now, the good thing was it wasn't like we were way off, like I was saying just before we got cut off, Southern Union, ended up winning the championship, I think, a couple days ago. And I think I'm wrong, or I'm right on this. It's about a 3 or 4 run differential between the two of us. So, and that's with a team full of freshmen, with us. They had, I would say, probably 4 of the best players in the league. Most of those were sophomores. We're excited to see that some of those are moving on to 4-year schools. So all those are, that can be daunting, but we're right there. You just need, a little bit of experience to put you over the edge. One of the things that was real pleasing, going down the stretch is we had some pitchers that started to figure out more consistently the things that they've got to do to win at this level. And, if there's anything that's going to be translatable to wins, and there's a lot of things that's got to be there. So we felt good about that. And, you take that experience and the ones that, are bought in to stay with a really, really good recruiting class, things look pretty bright moving forward for sure.
Something we as me and Phil kind of talking about as you were getting adjusted and everything was home and away record. The away record wasn't as good as you'd probably hope for. And I was telling Phil, my thoughts were that some of these girls have probably never played outside the state of Alabama, much less being on the road for possibly a week or more, not being able to go to their own house, But next year, it should be a whole different story because all these girls have traveled some.
Yeah, there's some of that. I mean, you got to pitch and defend better. And we've got to be, the things that make you more dynamic when you get into tight games. We didn't have a ton of what I would call primary position experience on the left side of the infield. We didn't have a ton of speed. We weren't deep enough in the pitching circle, and all those things show up. We could swing it fairly well, decent offensive numbers as a team, but, that's going to, when you get down to the, end of regular season, when you're facing aces and everybody's trying to qualify for playoffs, and then obviously even more so in the playoffs, it kind of goes in this order. You got pitching, speed, defense, then tools, the athletes, and the hitting kind of is last. And I don't mean that's not important, but it's going to go when it faces good pitching. There's no doubt about that. And so you've got to have a little bit more dynamic athleticism and experience to be able to carry you through those moments. And we just weren't ready yet. I think we'll be there, but that's something that doesn't usually just show right up in a year for sure.
Okay, Phil.
Yeah, well, Coach, to follow up on that, and of course, my opinion of some of that, I mean, of course, this may be way off, but when you're traveling with a new team, there's a lot of distractions. You know, these girls have never been to this place before. You know, even things like, you know, where do we go when we get off the bus? Where's the hotel room? You know, there's things that kind of sort of are distracting where when a more experienced team, all they're kind of worried about is stepping off the bus, walking on that field, and taking care of business. And that comes with experience.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, there's a toughness and experience factor that, you know, goes into the road. You know, and, you know, it takes a while. I mean, the group we took, you know, when Jimmy and I were at UAB, we weren't very good, you know, honestly on the road or at home. We set a home record. We were never, you know, we were always pretty much splitting, you know, on the road from there. And that's usually a hallmark of a team that's going to go deep in the post, where you're dominating at home and you're at least, you know, 500 or better on the road. But the biggest thing, you got to win the last game of the series, and that was something we didn't do a great job of, either home or on the road. You know, we used to call it Championship Sunday. Our series usually conclude on Saturday here, so, you know, Championship Saturday, there's usually like one of three items that are happening. Either you're, you know, avoiding getting swept, you're deciding the series, you know, or breaking some type of tie in some type of way. It's a little bit different when we're playing 4 games, but in those Saturday games, we'll call them now. I'm used to saying it in Sunday in Division I, but they are infinitely important going forward. And usually that's the same day you're going to be playing a championship game down the road, whether it's regional or World Series or beyond. So you got to win at the end of the day. And that's another thing that we've got to get better. It starts all the way back to conditioning and a mentality of, you know, wanting to be your best and, you know, go from there for sure.
Yeah, and you know, I feel like you do. I think this team is very competitive. It just, you know, there's some things that's got to happen to kind of get over that hump, whether it be pitching. And you know, of course, you're out recruiting now. What is your main focus? Is your big focus on the battery, catchers, and pitchers, because you can't have enough of them? Or are there other areas that you got some shortcomings you need to shore up?
Well, like I said, I mean, we were real fortunate to get on our 25 group, you know, pretty early. And, you know, obviously pitching is going to be in there. Catching goes right after that. Probably in this class, even more so than that, was the ability to be dynamic on the left side of the field. Those will go in softball faster than people realize. Yes, we are all after pitchers. There's no question about that. You're after catchers, probably very short order. The other position that people don't, you know, Emma Heineman did a really good job for us at third base. She'll tell you this, she's not a third baseman. She's more of a catcher, first baseman by trade. Did a pretty good job, probably defended as well as some of the better third basemen, if you look by the numbers we had in the league, but that's not her primary forte. And, you know, that takes, in our game, you have the ability to take away the short game. You have the ability to spin up the double play ball. You know, there's a lot of things, if you've got a dynamic third baseman, that can help offset a defense. And then the psychological aspect of, if we're coming inside or we're going soft and down with a pitcher, they're going to have, every single one of them would tell you, you're going to have more confidence if you know, hey, that play in space is going to be made. We weren't bad on plays that are like, you know, what I call on the ball plays that are hit at you, don't require a ton of range. We weren't great at being able to create takeaway outs. And a lot of that really wasn't the fault of our team. That I would say 7 out of the 9 kids we had were playing more of a secondary position than a primary one. And that will show up, especially late. So we feel like those needs are taken care of. The biggest thing we've got now is we want to make sure we hold on to it and get this class all in the door, because they're very good. You know, we're transitioning right now, you know, from, it's not going to be a program where you come here and you're like, hey, just want to get my school paid for, or hey, I think I want to go to the 13th grade. You know, we're looking for athletes that were very similar to what we had at UAB. We're looking for people who want to be the best at what they are doing. And, you know, junior college shouldn't be, oh, I'm just settling here because you were overlooked, it didn't fit. oh, you're smart enough to see that you're not on a Division I roster where you're going to have to sit behind, the umpteen people they put from the portal up there. So it's a great option. I think it's the best option right now, given all the turmoil that we've got in the college athletic process. So all those things factor into what we're trying to do with recruiting going forward for sure.
Yeah, I think me and Howie was kind of touching on that when you were off, that, you get to junior college and some of the players are maybe, softball might be kind of a recreational thing when it's all in, and some of them decide that maybe academics is more important, to take care of, and softball takes up too much of my time. So I guess that's some of the things that you've got to deal with.
Yeah, it's whether we were in Division I or we run our thing the same way. And a lot of kids will tell you when they're on the visit, hey, that's what I want, but that's not. They're saying and doing are two different things, and it's going to come out in the wash. And like you mentioned, academics. In my experience, I had a coach tell me this my freshman year in college, and I didn't 100% believe this. But usually, if not individually, but as a team, if you have a really high GPA, then you're usually going to do the little things on the field well too, because it's not all aptitude. It's like my dad used to tell me, what is smart? If you have a 36 ACT and you don't turn in your work, that's not very smart. If you have an 18 ACT and you turn everything in and you're, making sure you're hitting your tutors and all that, and that's helping you be the best you can be, that's a smart decision. So it's not all, we kind of confuse that a lot. And to me, like a GPA, a lot of times is a more of a tangible tool, at least historically, on what you're willing to do and what your process is like, than just a result. Not always, but that is typically generally been, what I've seen. So we'll see. We've had good numbers in that regard. A lot of the kids that have made the commitment to stay, and the kids that have made the commitment to show up for the first time, we feel really good about. And hopefully they're going to continue to raise the standard as we get here, because they've shown they've been capable of that for sure. There were a lot of good developmental aspects from those kids, and we measure that pretty succinctly as we go through the season, and that bodes well going into the future for sure.
Well, this bunch that you just finished with, I think you had about 6 sophomores that won't be back. Who are some of the ones that maybe were a bit of a surprise, or who are the players that are on the team now that you are counting on in the future? Talk about some of those.
Well, there were 4. I mean, a lot of people made good strides, no doubt. There were 4 that really were. It was, I think, in some ways, college was tougher than they thought, but they had a grueling experience, kind of mentally and physical, but it ended up being good for them. One would be Skylar Branch. She we had a time where we had to shut her down mid-season, trying to get some answers to working out some of the things injury-wise that she was having as with pitching, and we got a better understanding how to manage pain, how to go through kind of the car maintenance aspects, for lack of a better term, of what you got to do to get yourself ready to pitch every day. And then by the end of that, she was managing that pretty well, in addition to learning how to pitch and control the off speed, which is still a work in progress for her. But she was pitching with the better pitchers in our conference at the end of the year, which was a good thing. Kayla Warnock was another one of just understanding how to work through tough situations. Her stuff might be the best that we have of anybody. But, she's just got to trust it and believe that, any little thing that goes wrong isn't the end of the world. And I think she's done a better job of that as we've gotten through. And again, with her, command of the off speed, Cheyenne Parker was another one on the pitching side that, if she commands the changeup, which might be the best one of anybody's we have returning, she's good. She proved that against Wallace State. She proved that against Southern Union. She proved that against Northwest Shoals. And then there'll be kind of interludes between those starts sometimes that aren't great. But the gap was closing as we got forward, which, I was telling her, I was like, if we played another 40 games, and you continue at this rate, I see success down the road. I really do. Chloe Hatch was another one. Chloe overcame a lot. She's had some throwing issues in the outfield that are kind of mentally related. She worked real hard. We had some outside help with her of how to do that a little more efficiently. She's just a phenomenal athlete. I mean, she's got some hit ability. She can run. Defensively, she will not have to worry about multiple positions next year. She's just going to play outfield, which I think will help her mentally kind of focus. And then Kylie Weston's another one that's just can be a real terror. She can work the short game. She can play really any outfield position. At times really was great on some run saving catches for us. And, she hit over 400 this year for us. So she had a nice year. And I think she's capable of a lot more. I do. But that's a nice first year. So, you don't have to question whether those kids I mentioned are ever playing hard. It's just the ability to execute, at a high level and understand kind of what the situational moments have in front of you. So, but yeah, those were some of the kids that highlighted, some real good finishes for sure.
Well, one we want to speak of is Jolie Hatch. She made all conference. That had to be a big honor for her first year being at Northeast.
Yeah, I mean, she did. It's tough because that position in particular. I mean, Kylie was really close. We got down to they had real similar numbers. It's always tough too when you don't finish like as high. The first place second-base teams historically are going to kind of take the honors. And we had a really, really, really deep outfield in the conference. So I was worried about that for both those guys. I mean, fortunately, Chloe got in. But, I think that was, that's a big honor. It's hard to do it as a freshman, and it's hard to do it when you've got the player of the year coming out of your position group. There was a utility player in there that was there too, that was, taking up votes. So, I think the respect she had for the rest of the league, kind of spoke volumes there in that award for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, Coach, talk about, your staff, Jimmy Colitis. I know he's been huge. When we had Coach Haynes on, he's talked about he's so good in recruiting. If, in a program, he's so good at selling the program. And of course, your wife, of course, Courtney, she's a big part of the program. And talk a little bit about them. Also, talk about Dr. Campbell, Nathaniel Ledbetter, and, and the group that helped put things together. Talk about how important they are to this program.
Yeah, I don't know if I can say enough in this program or any other about how important Dr. Campbell was, that's why we all came. He had a vision that was unique to, all three of us have been around the block a couple of days. And it's rare to see a president that, you're looking at this. He had a vision for what he saw this doing. And that was backed up by, Nathaniel Ledbetter and Steve Livingston and, a lot of those guys that were involved in, getting the funding to do this. And, it was clear for me from day one that, what that says is you want to do it right. And, Nathaniel has said that publicly and he said that privately. And I believe it, that they want to do it right, and doing right, requires more of a commitment than your average bear doing this. So we're eternally grateful there. And, as far as the staff, I mean, Jimmy's a huge asset. He's still in the Team USA coaching pool. He did a great job with our hitters this year. Did a good job with some catchers that were really young. We swung the bat, pretty well, considering that we had a very young team with not a ton of speed, almost averaged a home run a game. So we did some good things there. Averaged, I think, between 5 and 6 runs a game, which is pretty good for our first-year team. And then Courtney, the biggest thing was the development, the continued success of those three arms. I mean, that had zero. Absolutely, that was one of the youngest position groups we had was in the pitching circle, which, again, that's going to contribute to some boo-boos, when you're on the field for sure, especially at that position. But those three were really, really hitting the accelerator in a good way going forward. And, we feel good about it. We got 4 of them that are coming in next year that are going to challenge them. They will have an edge in experience in terms of the ones coming back, and the ones that are coming in may have a leg up in talent, on paper. We'll see how that translates, at this level. But Courtney's the glue that kind of keeps that together. And, it's a nice staff to have. I spend most of the time on the road this time of year. But, for me, it's kind of the overseeing of all of it, and the defense and base running portion of it, I'm knee deep in. I've got my hands in a little bit of all of it, but particularly that. So, it's a good, we've all worked together before, and we've worked together at a high level. So it's nice having that familiarity, but it's a good synergy between, from the supporters we have outside the field, the president, the AD, and our coaching staff for sure.
Well, Coach, there's a couple things I want to ask you about. Is there kind of a highlight, maybe a weekend or something where you felt like this team really maybe is starting to turn the corner and maybe starting to get it?
Yeah, well, for me, it was at the end. When we're playing, it's hard. It wasn't like we were getting blown out 20-0. In some ways, it's
Uh-uh.
harder to deal with what we dealt with because you're right there, and we're just a player or two, a play away. You look at things and go, we're not experienced or athletic enough in that spot to do this. But we will be. As we're going where we are, and that there's a time to when you're really disappointed at a group, and then there's a time where you're just trying to pull out moments. But we fought. The Northwest Shoals deal. I think they ended up finished third. They were playing really well at the end of the year. We beat them the first game of that series. We ran out of time in the second game. We had a halted game that was called due to weather, and then we went over there and played them about as hard as we could. Lost 3-2. And then even the last game, they really tipped the scales in their favor in the last game. We were down, I think it was 9-3 or something like that in the last inning. Ended up being 9-6. We didn't quit at any point. So that's a positive, when you look at it culturally, that the people that are there, despite that licking, and despite having to go through, 1-run losses and 2-run losses and games that we just couldn't close, and we're really not supposed to yet with the age and experience that we have. For them to stay in the saddle, I think that was to me the most positive thing going forward. Because I have seen teams that have gone through stuff like that have just folded the tents up. And that's not what we did. So that's the biggest thing that I was hoping was going to point in a good direction and did. So I feel pretty good about that for sure.
Oh, that's good. That's great. Well, Coach, talk about this. I know at home this team played pretty well. How was the atmosphere? How was the crowd? I know, there's a lot of things that go around in playing at home. That's big for these young ladies to play well at home because the fans get excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and I've had multiple people comment about this. A lot of them were opposing fans and teams we played. The atmosphere was second to none in junior college. There's not one. We had really good crowds all the time. One of the things that wasn't great for us is in the scheduling. For whatever reason, the cookie didn't crumble well for us in terms of scheduling, where we didn't have a lot of Saturday home games in conference. So that's going to impact. You would think it would impact your attendance a little bit negatively. It really didn't. I mean, I think it would have been better had we been at home more, but we were playing a lot of Thursday home games as opposed to Saturday home games. But we had good crowds all the time, and the other teams would talk about that. The atmosphere, Dr. Campbell mentioned this publicly at the end of the year. We're still looking at some things we can do. It was really kind of a trial run year, but there's still a lot of things we can do, in terms of being able. We had mascots this year, and we had some cool sound effects, but there's a lot more we can do with the video boards and promotional nights and things like that. Now that we've kind of, people forget we got this thing done. I mean, by the skin of our teeth in November. We basically took a breath, came back in January. We got to get ready to play, and we started play on February 1st. So there was a lot of stuff we were learning. We were learning our video system. We were learning, how to clean the field, turf properly, what works, what doesn't work. And I don't think we've got that 100% right, figured out yet, but we're a lot smarter than we were a few months ago, and hopefully we'll be a lot smarter by the time we get rolling next year. But it's just it's a really, really cool toy that has a lot of options, and we're still learning how to play with it for sure.
Yeah, well, of course, that's the thing is you got a lot of young ladies that's learning to play the game and learn to play at this level because they're used to being, the it on their team, and now everybody's got to blend in together. And of course, the coaching staff is also learning. This is a new thing for them also. Well, Coach, I'm going to turn it over to Howard, but I want to ask you, Beth, I want you to promote you've got your camp coming up the 1st of June, and I'm sure you're going to have several of your players that's going to come back and help, instructing in that. Tell us about that for people that are interested in the camp coming up in June and July.
So what we're doing is every Wednesday night from 6 to 8, starting that week of June 2nd, every Wednesday night we'll do a 6 to 8 camp. We did this last year, but it was kind of a road show. We usually do the first part of it where we do individual skill work, whether, it's me working with, the infielders, Jimmy working the catchers, Courtney doing the pitchers. And then we bring the second hour, we run into our situations into practice. So they get a kind of a small dose of what, college practice looks like in a 2-hour period. So, we had a lot of success with that last year. We're just offering that opportunity, a little more frequently. We're going to do that every Wednesday. And then, Wednesday during the day and Sundays are two of the days that I am doing lessons as well in smaller groups. And then we've got, Jimmy's had a, kind of a, drifting lessons usually on Monday and Tuesdays. Courtney does her big lessons on Monday. They've continued to do that throughout the year. I would love to continue to do that throughout the year, but it's a little much when you're running the team during the season. So we've got that going on. I'm doing a little coaching in the Scenic City Collegiate League, for portal kids, and kids that are at 4-year levels that are looking to, get better. We're getting that on tap. That's going to start, mid-June. So I'm going to be doing that for about a month. So we're going to be busy this summer. I'm pretty much coaching up there, most days during the week. It's just an early morning thing. And then we're popping back down and doing our camps in our place. And thank goodness it's close to Northeast, so we can kind of, cover down on all areas. But we'll be busy for sure. And, with Chattanooga being such a travel ball hub, we'll have a lot of that going on as well, for sure, in terms of recruiting. So we'll be really close to that area a lot, but we'll also be further away. We'll be in Texas some, so I think that's the furthest trip we've got planned. But yeah, a lot of stuff going on for sure.
Coach, we appreciate. Oh, I'm sorry, Phil. Coach, we appreciate your time. You told us before we got started about 30 minutes, and we appreciate it. We're going to go over just a couple of minutes. Hope that's all right. But
yeah,
I got a couple quick questions, and we'll let you get out of here. We know you've been on the road all day. Phil hit on a lot of stuff with Dr. Campbell, the home stuff. This ain't possible without being able to get to the away games as well. Tell us a little bit about that. Who was responsible as far as getting you to and from the away games?
Yeah, so we had I don't know if you guys saw this on social media, but I think that bus was like $500,000. I mean, it's really cool. And, Dr. Campbell wanted to have, we had a, police escort, which was really cool. You felt like you were Alabama football, everywhere we went. Our bus drivers, Chris, they did a great job. So it was, the bus is really phenomenal. I mean, we've got a little table up front, that you can, for the coaches to, if we need to go through charts or film or anything like that, you got it on there. I think it's like 40 plus seats. So I just know this, our girls aren't like stacked up on top of each other by any means. Most of them have their own seat. So that was pretty neat. And it being new, I don't know that I've been on too many new buses, whether they were charter or whatnot, but that was really cool. And that's going to be an asset, not only the softball team, but, for the entire school as well, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure you got Chris's name out there, Chris Peak. I've known some of him and his family for a few years, and I know he's all about the Mustangs and wants to help out any way possible.
Yeah, dynamite bus driver, man. I mean, he does a lot of CDL stuff, for our, that's a big deal for, us at Northeast, and pretty cool to have that. I mean, I've been a lot of places, and sometimes we'll get a charter company where you kind of know the driver and you get to know them, that kind of thing. But A, they cost a lot more, and B, they probably weren't as good as Chris. So it was it was a benefit to us in more ways than one, for sure.
Hey, I want to chime in and ask one thing, Coach. On the road, who picks where you eat?
I do nothing of that. You'll tell our, Courtney does our entire schedule. She's not. I don't deal with that at all. Now, sometimes I would say it usually has some coordination with the players, but I do nothing of that. Of course, me being a carnivore guy, you're not going to get, I'm not going to satisfy the masses at all. So I usually have a plan that is separate than everybody else's, because it would be, that's not going to work real well with the team. So that's kind of like with, uniforms or clothing or anything like that. I stay as far away from that as I can. That's what Courtney does, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, that's the danger territory for me.
One last thing, then we'll let you get out here, Coach. For everyone that's watching, and we got quite a few people watching, and I'm sure we got some high school kids that are watching as well, girls. Any advice for them that's going to be potentially looking for a place to go play softball?
I think the biggest thing with this group that's coming up, I'm talking about your class of 26, class of 27, class of 28, beyond, is pay very close attention to the rulings that are going to come out this summer. We don't know what's going to happen. And I say this summer in quotes. That's what we've been told. A lot of people are paying attention to the Diego Pavia case, and that's a show unto itself. But if they are looking at extending the clock at all, for junior colleges, whether they do or they don't, the bottom line is there are a lot of people in the portal. There are a lot of rosters there are going to be a lot of people that are looking for homes. And the trend right now, at least from what we've heard at the 4-year level, is they are going to cut rosters. And at the long and the short of that is, if you are a high school senior, you need to think long and hard of how much really, schools at the 4-year level are vested in your development versus a JC. And that is new. We've always been at this level, vested in development. The difference was when we were at the 4-year level, we were more vested in development. That's just not the case with the model that we have now. It is go to the portal, get rich quick, get where we need to go, and go from there. And that's something that I think needs to seriously be considered by the upcoming prospects, because it is radically different than it used to be. So if you're going about your business the same way that you did, I think you need to take a long, hard look at all the elements in the equation, because they have changed. And at the end of the day, you want to go to a place where you can get better and you're a fit. And you don't want to go to a place where you're maybe going to be lost in the shuffle very quickly. And that reality is different than it used to be, and it's going to change. So pay attention to those. We try to educate people as much as we can, from just the standpoint of making a good decision. Obviously, we're not going to sign every player in America, but they do need to be educated on, what will help them, get where they need to go. So those are things, should be some big news coming out as early as the summer, could drag out to December. You just never know with today's NCAA, but those are things to definitely, keep your ears and eyes open on, because they're going to be different for sure.
Coach, we appreciate your time coming on. We'd love to be able to get you back on here when you had a little bit more time. We can sit here and talk softball and new rules and everything. Talk about the big stadium that you got there at Northeast and everything. But we appreciate you coming on and spending a little bit of time with us. Know you've been on the road today at the state championship games down in Oxford and places like that. And I'm sure you saw some good prospects there as well.
Yeah, it's good stuff. We're I got to see Scottsboro. They didn't work out. Obviously I live here and they're a close team, and Pisgah was there today too. I didn't see how their last game came out. I had to get back home, but Scottsboro, unfortunately, came up short today. But a great season, and it's good to see 4 local teams that are from the 2-county area there. Gonna head to state, and hopefully one or multiple ones of them come back and and win a state championships. But it was cool to see that for the community for sure.
Awesome. Well, Coach, we appreciate your time, and you're welcome. Come back on here anytime. Just reach out to us whenever you want to come on. And even if you got something to promote, like your upcoming camp, if you want to promote it again, just let us know. We'll be more than happy to put you on here and let you talk about that all you want.
Will do. Well, I appreciate it, guys, and thanks for having me. And y'all need anything my way, let me know. I appreciate it greatly. Thank you.
Hey, no problem. This is Coach Joe Guthrie of the Northeast Alabama Community softball team. So for the Howie Chaney, Phil Harris, this is Beyond the Booth. Good night. God bless everyone.
Thanks, guys.